Active reading and note-taking. This section will offer strategies that will help you activate your academic reading and take notes more effectively and efficiently in class. As you review the material in this section, try to keep your own assumptions about reading and note-taking in mind. Consider what strategies have worked best for you in the past, and think about habits and practices you have engaged in that have not served you well. What are your strengths as a reader? As a note-taker? And are there areas where you think you could improve? Finally, take a moment to reflect on what you feel you already know about these two activities, not just from your own experience, but also from what others have taught you and what you learned in school. Remember, most of us are certain that we already know how to do these things well, and I have no doubt that many of you do, but by thinking about what kind of reader you are and how you think about how you have always taken notes, it opens your mind to the possibility that there may be room for you to improve your practices. Being open to the possibility of growth is the key to achieving growth. Active reading and note-taking. It's hard to think of two skills that are more crucial to academic success in college than having the ability to read efficiently and effectively and the ability to take good notes in class, what we call active reading and good, solid note-taking. Here's the tricky thing about these two skills: most people think they already have them. That's because if you can read, you think you can read actively. And if you can write something down in class, you might think you can take pretty good notes. And some of you, I'm sure, do. But the fact is that college is going to push you to your academic limits, and it's going to ask you to do things intellectually and academically that you haven't been asked to do before, and so it's incredibly important to make sure that those skills are in place and that you're completely up to speed and ready to go. So we want to think about active reading a little bit differently, and we want to think about note-taking a little bit differently than maybe you thought about it in high school. One thing to be very clear right off the bat is that there is a lot of good information on the internet and a lot of really great research done on these two specific academic skills: the ability to read efficiently and effectively and the ability to take good notes in class. So our strategies are not going to be exhaustive, but what they are is a really helpful start, a helpful primer for you to make sure that you are ready to go when it is time to go into the classroom. Faculty. How to activate your reading. I want you to think about the last thing you were assigned to read. How did you start? Did you start with the first word, and then the second, and the third, and so on, until the piece was finished? Did you do any research before you started reading? Did you take a moment to think about what you were reading and why? Chances are you engaged in something called passive reading, which is how most of us have read for most of our lives. But in college, the academic demands will force you to activate your machine translated by Google reading. And that's what we want to help you with today. We'll give you some strategies to help you activate your reading to make it more effective and efficient. I want to talk about active reading in the context of active learning. Is active learning how we always learn? Unfortunately, the answer is no. A lot of learning is passive, but active learning is different because it means that while you're learning something about a subject, you're also spending time and energy thinking about your learning as a process. This means that you're thinking not just about what you learn, but also about how you learn it. You are identifying potential weaknesses in your learning process, and you are really leaning into your learning strengths. This also means that you are seeking constant feedback on your own process, and you are always looking to find ways to become a better, more active, and more engaged learner. That is essentially what active learning is. It is learning with the mind always in the direction of becoming an even better learner than you already are. So if that's active learning, what is active reading? It's essentially the same idea. When you read, you're thinking about how you can become a more efficient and effective reader. You're not just reading what's in front of you, you're also reading your own understanding of how you read, where your strengths and weaknesses are, and where you can improve. And today, we're going to give you some strategies to help you become even more active in your reading, even if you've already invested a little bit of time and energy into thinking about what kind of reader you are. Let's talk a little bit about what passive reading is like. It's kind of like what I just talked about when it started. It means that you were given something to read, start with the first word and move on to the second and third, go from one sentence to another, from paragraph to paragraph until you finish the text. Basically, it means that you approach something cold, with very little information, and proceed in polite chronological order until you reach the end. The best example of passive reading is the kind of reading you did as a kid, where you started with Once Upon a Time and ended with the end. That's not how we want to read in college. Instead, we want to activate our reading. And here are 6 easy things you can do to help activate your reading, to help you become a more engaged reader, and, critically, to make your reading more efficient. The first thing you need to do is to distinguish what kind of reading you are doing. Different types of reading can be read and should be read in different ways. Consider, for example, that you are taking 2 classes. A British novel class and a biology class. In the novel class, you will be given long fiction books. In the biology class, you will be given a textbook. Obviously, you don't want to read these things. Likewise, the novel you might want to read by looking at the introduction first, to get a basic idea of what the novel is about. The textbook you might want to start with problem sets in the back of the book, before actually reading the material. Or you might start by skimming the material and looking at the bold headlines first. Machine translated by Google. Again, different types of reading are read in different ways, and it is important to realize that if you are an active reader, you will consider the type of reading you are doing before you begin. Second, you want to ask yourself why you are doing the reading. What is the purpose of reading? Are you preparing for an exam? Are you reading something so you can write a paper for it? Are you reading because it's an optional subject? Or are you reading for interest? Knowing the purpose of your reading helps guide the type of reading you do and is an important question to ask yourself at the beginning of any reading engagement. Third, and it may seem simple, you need to think about where and when you are reading. It's especially important to self-assess how productive your reading sessions are. If you spend an hour reading and you're not doing an hour of reading, you want to ask why. Does it have to do with the where? Does it have to do with the time of day? Does it have to do with your energy level? These things that seem somehow extraneous to the reading can actually affect how productive we are when we read. And that's why we always want to think of them as reading for our classes. Then we want to prepare our reading. And to me, this is one of the most powerful strategies for active reading, especially when the material is difficult. If someone were to assign you on truth and lies in an extramoral sense, you would find yourself in the presence of a very difficult text. And trying to read that text from the beginning to the end would leave most of us completely perplexed. But if you did a little research online about the play, or if you talked to your teacher about how best to approach the material, or if you talked to a friend who studied that play last semester, you might find that by preparing your reading this way, you'll be able to engage with the reading more quickly and productively. Anytime we prepare to read something, especially when it's difficult, we increase our comprehension and retention. And here's the good news, it doesn't have to take a lot of time. So after you've read something, you want to take a moment to articulate the big idea. What's the most important point? What's the central concept? Why was this reading assigned in the first place? Essentially, what you're doing is taking a moment to identify the meaning of the reading in the context of your larger study of the material. Again, this doesn't have to take a lot of time, but spending just 2 or 3 minutes identifying the significance of the reading you just finished can help cement that significance in your mind and can help with your comprehension and retention of the material. Basically, what we're describing here is part of 3 reading processes. Pre-reading, which is doing a little pre-research before you read something, especially if it's complex. Reading the thing itself, and then reviewing it, is identifying the main significance of what you've read, not talking to someone about something you've read. Or you can talk to someone who's read the same thing and share your thoughts or even have a discussion about the reading, or someone who doesn't know anything about the subject, you can try to teach them a little bit about what you've just read. And one of my favorite strategies is to develop test questions. Think about what kinds of questions might appear on a test about this reading. And if you have a friend who is in the same class reading the same thing, ask them to develop questions as well, change those questions, ask them, and then grade each other on someone else's work. This is a great way to test each other. Reading comprehension before the test, it assesses you. I want to talk quickly about machine translated by Google. A chart that you'll see a lot in terms of active reading that gives you 6 verbs that are meant to help you think about active reading in 6 different ways. Visualize, clarify, question, predict, connect, and evaluate. I want to take these and contextualize them from a college classroom to help you get a little bit better idea of what that might look like. To visualize, I want you to think about the moment when the idea for your class reading came to you, or visualize a time when a student actually did something and asked thoughtful questions about it. Making this cognitive connection can really help your understanding of the material. To clarify, think about annotating your text. Remember, you should never read in college without a pen or pencil in hand. Ask yourself why you were assigned the reading. When you're done reading, think about why it appeared in the syllabus, and trying to justify its existence in the curriculum will often make it easier to identify the meaning of the particular reading. To anticipate, you can try to imagine the questions on the exam. If you were the teacher, what kinds of questions would you ask someone to assess their familiarity with the reading? Connect the reading you just did to other materials in the syllabus and think about how those connections could, for example, become an article or an essay. And finally, consider how you could use the reading as evidence in a larger argument for an article. Now remember, this is not an exhaustive look at how to activate your reading, but I hope some of these strategies are helpful to you. And also remember, if you have a strategy that helps you activate your reading and it works for you and you are getting the results you want, keep doing it. Effective text markup. Text marking or annotating our text as we read. We know we should, but we don't always know why we should. Let's talk a little now about why we mark our text and how to make these notes as effective as possible. We mark up our text when we read for 3 main reasons. First, we're trying to distinguish between different types of information in our reading. In particular, we're trying to focus on information that matters versus information that doesn't. Information that we need to spend time remembering and studying versus information that we can ignore or skip. The second thing we do is create a guide through our markup for future study of the material. You can think of your note as a text, as a sort of reading trail for your future self. When you encounter this material later, you'll have a much clearer path to study it, because you've already been there, and you've left marks for yourself. Finally, we mark up our text because we are trying to make it more manageable in the future, particularly when the information is very complex or when there is a huge amount of information. To make it more manageable, we have tagged it so that we can better understand it when reading it second time. So when we think about a system to mark up our text, we want our system to do 3 things. We want it to immediately distinguish between different types of information, in other words, to help us figure out what matters and what doesn't. Second, machine translated by Google. We want our future materials learning to be as efficient as possible, and thirdly, we want our materials, especially complex or abundant materials, to be more manageable in the future. The main technologies we use to do TS are underlining and highlighting. This is done in elementary, middle, and high school. You highlight things that are important, or you underline them. But today I want to problematize the idea of underlining and highlighting as a technology for marking up our text in the most efficient way. The problems with highlighting and underlining are multiple. The first problem is that when you highlight or underline something, you create a binary category. You create two types of information that matters and information that doesn't. And while that's what highlighting is supposed to do, the material we encounter in college is going to be more sophisticated than that, so maybe we need to be able to mark up our text in a way that identifies all kinds of importance or materiality, rather than just importance or unimportance. And that's not really possible with highlighting or underlining. We automatically divide text into things. This is important, not the things we should learn or not learn. Secondly, the process itself is time consuming. If we have to highlight an entire paragraph, it can take 30 seconds or even a minute, adding precious time to our already time-consuming reading process. We also find, mainly with dense material or technical material, that we highlight or we emphasize. If you have a whole page of highlighted text, that really doesn't help much. And finally, divide the information into just two categories. It doesn't require a lot of critical thinking or cognitive effort, and we want our notes, we want our highlighting text to require some critical thinking to help us in our understanding and retention of the material. Here you see a page of text that has been underlined, and as you can see very clearly, it distinguishes and separates the information into two categories, literally underlined and non-underlined categories, but more importantly, information that we need to learn versus information that we can ignore. The same goes for highlighting, two categories of information. What information is missing, and critically, how important are these different highlighted pieces? The information is relative to each other. That's the information we want for our tagging system to try to capture. The system I propose here does just that. I call it the 1, 2, 3 scoring system, a series of dashes next to your text that not only tells you that text is important, but gives you an immediate indication of how important it is. At a glance, this information is likely to be useful to you. 2 dashes mean this is important, I need to learn this. 3 dashes mean this is a key concept or idea. You should fully understand this and be able to talk about it without using my notes or my textbook. Another way to think about it, first, this information is interesting, it could strengthen an essay, or it's something I'd like to remember. Second, I should probably learn this material if I have enough time. 3, I need to prioritize this material because it's fundamental, it's important, and I need to fully understand it. I've even added a 4th set of dashes here for information that the teacher says will be on the exam. You can see the system in Machine Translated by Google operation here. It's not that different from underlining or highlighting, except that at a single glance, you can tell not only what's important, but how important the information is to the other. You can see, for example, at the bottom of the page, a very, very important point, probably a point that would be worthy of an exam question or an essay question. And here you see that there has been an additional note made. This system also allows for annotations in the margins. The benefits of the system are multiple. 1. As I said, is that it allows you to quickly and easily distinguish important information and also how important that information is. It basically gives you a sort of signal of how important a particular piece of information is. Second, the system gives you an idea of how important the information is to others. At a glance, you don't have to waste time rereading the material to understand how important it is. The marking system is then easy to practice and allows for easy modification. So if you were to highlight an entire paragraph and later realize that the paragraph was not as important as you thought, it would be very difficult to remove the highlight from that paragraph. But if you were to write 3 dashes next to a paragraph, and later realize that the paragraph isn't that important, you could easily change it to a single dash, alerting you to the fact that it's worth remembering but not of critical fundamental importance. It also, again, allows for easy note-taking. You can add additional words next to your dashes to help you identify why a piece of information is important or to record a question you have. And finally, when you're annotating your text like this, you no longer have any highlighter smudging the page, you no longer have underlines crossing out words. It also works great when printing on double-sided paper. A few additional things to remember. First, if you're already using heavily annotated textbooks, I encourage you to skip buying them and try to find a less used copy. When textbooks are used long before you are, 1. You don't know what kind of marking system that person was using, and 2. You don't know that they were looking for exactly the things you were looking for, so your markings can throw you off. Second, your marking system should help you, not hinder you. If your marking system adds substantial time to your reading practice, try to evolve or iterate on it to make it more streamlined. Again, your annotation process should only add seconds or minutes, not hours. And finally, if you have a different marking system than this one, and it's working for you, and you're getting the results you want, keep doing it.